the space station. We do have umbilical retraction. There's a series of hooks that are to be unhooked first, Group 1 and Group 2. We'll stand by for confirmation of those latches to be unhooked. Group 1 is currently in the process of unhooking. Again, a series of commands until we actually have physical separation that occurs with a burn. After that, you'll start seeing Dragon, which from this view you can see on the left, physically move away from the International Space Station, currently docked to the International Docking Adapter. The first set of hooks are open. The next step is for the second set to unhook, which is now in progress. This process takes about 2 minutes. Once the Group 2 latches are unhooked, there'll be a physical separation burn that'll officially undock Dragon from the International Space Station, currently scheduled at 1:31 a.m. Central Time. At this time, the Group 1 latches are unhooked. Group 2 currently driving about 1 minute into the 2 minutes of the unhooking process. Everything on track for an on-time undocking, currently scheduled for 1:31 a.m. Central. One minute 45 seconds into the 2-minute process. Everything's still on track. And we have motion. You see Dragon physically separating from the International Space Station, 1:32 a.m. Central Time, the International Space Station 253 statute miles over Sedan.
Houston Station, space to ground to ISS thrusters enabled.
Copy. So there you can see on your screen visual confirmation. What a gorgeous shot. Dragon has undocked from the International Space Station, and we are beginning the departure.
That's right, and you're going to hear the voice of David St. Jacques again. He's the one inside of the station monitoring Dragon for its departure. It's slowly backing away. Everything's looked good so far with those separation burns. Again, as Gary said, That physical separation, that undocking coming at 11:32 p.m. here Pacific.
2, Dragon departure burn 0 complete.
Copy, departure burn 0 complete.
So you heard us mention earlier that we have a series of 4 departure burns, starting with 0, 0, 1, 2, 3. We have confirmation that departure burn 0 has been completed.
That's right, and so with that one down, we're going to start seeing Dragon begin flying actually above the International Space Station. And then coming up in just a couple of minutes, departure burn 1, the second departure burn, will be coming. That should be in about 4 or 5 minutes from now. And so we're going to see Dragon just kind of swing its way over top the space station and eventually fly out of both the keep out sphere and the approach ellipsoid. And so the keep out sphere is one of my favorite things. It's an imaginary sphere with about a 200-mile radius, so 200-meter radius. That would be a much bigger sphere. A 200-meter radius in all directions. And that just governs, so kind of like the approach ellipsoid, which I explained earlier, before you're in the keep out sphere, any maneuvers with the spacecraft have to be safe and not get inside within 4 orbits.
Dragon's in the corridor, and opening rate is as expected.
Copy.
And David St. Jacques reporting everything looking good so far. You heard him say the corridor, so they, on their overlays that they have on their laptops on board the station where they're actually monitoring Dragon, they're looking for any perturbations outside of the expected path. If they see anything that doesn't quite look right, again, they're in the loop and they can send commands, but everything going smoothly with Dragon slowly flying away. This kind of an animated representation of the kind of stuff that the crew is looking for. They have that corridor, so kind of that triangular shape you can see there, where they're just looking to make sure Dragon's pitch, yaw, approach, speeds, everything like that are inside of parameters as expected.
In that shot right there, you can see that the nose cone of Dragon is still open. Unlike our CRS missions, we actually maintain that nose cone. We will be closing it prior to Dragon's re-entry.
Copy, 0.55.
Like we mentioned before, the entire departure process is slightly different from the approach process in that there are no hard stops, there are no hold points. Dragon's trajectory will be smooth and continuous as it moves away from the International Space Station and back towards Earth.
And we should be just about 2 minutes or so away from departure burn 1, and that'll be the second of 4 that we're going to be expecting today. And it's actually only going to change Dragon's speed by about 0.6 meters per second. So we're talking very small changes in the speed of the vehicle just to get it away from the space station. But as we talked about a lot during the docking broadcast a little bit earlier this week, keep in mind, Dragon and Space Station are flying at over 17,500 miles an hour right now relative to the Earth. So they're still traveling at these enormous velocities, but then you have these very small thruster firings to barely change the speed of the vehicle, and within just a matter of minutes, you're kilometers or miles away from each other. So
that's a great point. It's really easy to forget that with views like this where everything seems like it's just standing still, but in fact, everything is moving incredibly fast.
All right, we're about 1 minute away from that next departure burn. This will be the burn that really begins swinging Dragon up and around the space station, and this will be the burn that actually carries it out of that keep out sphere and that exit through the approach ellipsoid. Now we're going to stick around with this as long as we have views of Dragon, and at a minimum until we're out of that approach ellipsoid, because that'll basically just mean that Dragon is outside of the neighborhood of the International Space Station and ready to begin its final departure burns, ultimately setting it up for its way home. So departure burn 0 came after those initial undocking burns that started carrying Dragon away. Departure burn 1 is going to be coming up shortly.
Station Houston and 2, departure burn 1 completed successfully.
So we have confirmation that departure burn 1, which is actually our second burn of the morning, is complete.
Copy, and Dragon is outside of the keep out sphere.
All right, and as you just heard the Capcom tell the crew, Dragon's outside of the keep out sphere.
Farewell, Dragon.
So that means at this point, Dragon's already more than 200 meters away. The next big milestone for it is when it actually gets outside of that approach ellipsoid, which again is an oval about 2 kilometers in height, so Dragon will be a little over 2 kilometers probably away from the space station by the time it exits that. And we're going to continue to follow along and watch. Once it's actually outside of that approach ellipsoid, it'll do another departure burn number 2. That's the third of 4. And that begins sending it back down underneath the International Space Station because, as Kate talked about a little bit earlier, once Dragon jettisons its trunk prior to the deorbit, we do want to make sure that it's below the space station's altitude. So that'll be coming up in a little while. But Dragon continuing to fly free. Look, everything looking good so far.
Like Dan said, the next big milestone that we're looking for here is exiting that approach ellipsoid. We're expecting that to happen at 11:48 p.m. Pacific, which is in about 8 minutes from now.
And you can actually see some of the Draco thruster firings from this view. Dragon a little over 400 meters now away from the space station.
So just in case you've just tuned in, we are currently watching Dragon as it departs from the International Space Station. It's been a really smooth operation so far with the undocking procedure, and now we're moving into departure. We will be losing video feed for a couple of minutes shortly, but as of right now, you can see on your screen the Dragon capsule moving away and towards the, as it moves out away from the approach ellipsoid. There we can see the nose cone still in its open position, leaving the forward hatch exposed. We will be closing that prior to Dragon's re-entry. We should have the exit from the approach ellipsoid here in just 5 minutes or so.